I wrote this research paper titled A Critical Literature Review on Anorexia Nervosa for my first year writing seminar on the psychology of eating disorders. I chose to research anorexia in particular due to its personal significance to me and its unfortunate glamorization and increasing popularity throughout the media in recent years. Researching and writing about anorexia was incredibly pertinent because adolescent females, including college students like myself and my peers, are the most susceptible to this disorder. In fact, its prevalence has increased in Western cultures like the United States due to the sociocultural ideal of thinness. It was very meaningful for me to learn about how society propagates diet culture and unrealistically skinny body standards through advertisement, print, film, and other mediums. With the increase of technology and social media, vulnerable young girls have become more exposed to these damaging ideals. Reading scientific literature on this topic was memorable in that it made me more aware of the symptoms of anorexia and ways to prevent or treat it. I hope to reduce the stigma around eating disorders and advocate for seeking help for mental health. Eating disorders are mental disorders that have detrimental consequences and necessitate treatment, just like any physical ailments. Additionally, they affect all mental, physical, and emotional realms of life. Now, regarding the writing process itself, this paper was my first experience conducting a formal literature review of extensive scientific research. One challenge I encountered was consolidating all of the relevant peer-reviewed journal articles into concise information that I wanted to highlight. Initially, my process was to create an outline of all the sections and subjects I wanted to cover, along with sources that demonstrated this information. However, once I actually began writing my paper, I realized that I was attempting to cover far too many sources and too many topics. Thus, I learned to focus on only the most important research and dive deeper into those sources. In my future writing, I will consider the length of the paper I plan to write and the task given, and determine approximately how many topics and sources I can thoroughly elaborate on, rather than briefly touching on many. And creating a detailed outline was very beneficial for a long paper like this, in order to organize my thoughts ahead of time and analyze what is less important that I can leave out of the final product. Additionally, I learned about corroborating evidence across multiple articles and evaluating the strengths and limitations of conflicting sources. For example, some research may say that the lifetime prevalence of anorexia is 0.8%, while others say it's higher or lower. One crucial point for me to keep in mind is that these sources are not necessarily wrong, but rather that different study samples and methods can produce different results. In the end, I used the sources with the most strengths and least limitations, and I looked for the average from different sources and found articles that were literature reviews in themselves. It was sometimes difficult to analyze all of the limitations of these massive experiments and long research papers, but I learned about what makes a strong procedure and what doesn't, and how to thoroughly read through these long pieces of information. For example, a recent study on a large sample size is more generalizable than an old case study. And this applies to not just scientific writing, but any writing that requires you to evaluate evidence. Lastly, I enhanced my critical thinking abilities by discerning gaps in existing literature to propose areas for future investigation. One critical aspect to advancing the scientific community is exploring new areas that haven't been researched before. Thus, I had to consider everything I learned, and from that, formulate new questions inspired by existing knowledge. This is applicable to my future writing in that I can investigate areas of curiosity based on what I already know and what I seek to further discover. Thank you.